I don't really know how to start this video. And I know I don't really need to be making this video. I just felt like I couldn't come back here like doing other stuff and acting like nothing has happened. But I lost my mom, and it was very unexpected and quick, too soon. Like I said, I don't think I could have came back on here and creating content and not addressing what's wrong with me, because I am no longer like the same person I once was. And I know like my energy is not going to be the same coming on here from now on. But I'm going to try my best and continue here, because my mom did really love watching me on YouTube here. And even if she didn't understand everything completely because her main language is Spanish, she still watched every single video. And she loved the fact that I was doing this too. So I want to make sure, and I'm going to continue creating content for her. But I want to make this very brief. I don't want to drag this video longer than what it needs to be. But I'll pretty briefly explain kind of what happened. And maybe it can bring some sort of awareness to what happened. So my mom was sick, just like had a cold, and it developed like on a Friday. And I spoke to her the next day, Saturday. She sounded pretty sick, but you know, with the time of year it is, everyone's sick. And you know, she was outside and she was like, oh yeah, I'm sick. I don't feel too good. Like I have a runny nose and I have like a slight fever. And I had mentioned to her to not go outside because she had to go somewhere that day. I said, don't go outside, because it was the coldest day that we have had yet in this winter, where the high was like 8 degrees, but it was very, very windy. She went out anyway, and I think it like made her worse, because the next day, you know, she said she was miserable, like, and she was really bad. And my dad was going away to go visit his mom in another country, to Dominican Republic, on Monday, really early in the morning. So I told her Sunday, like, I'm gonna come over and visit you. If you're gonna go to work, like when you get out of work, I'll come over. So Monday, I usually drop off my son to his other grandparents' house, and I have to drive by my parents' house to get there. And I noticed my mom's car was in the driveway. So, you know, I called her to check if everything was okay. She wasn't answering. You know, so then I was thinking maybe she did go to work and somebody just took her, because she didn't feel too well to drive. So I waited until it was like her time to get out, which was 1:30. Calling her again, no answers, until she finally calls me back, you know, like an hour later, and says, oh yeah, I came home early, took some NyQuil and knocked out. But it was really confusing to me as to how knocked out she was. It was just some over-the-counter medicine. So I went over then later to go check on her. She was just taking a nap. She was still sleeping. She was just like, I just want to sleep this off. She had like stomach issues, like, you know, and I was like, okay, well, I brought some soup. I brought Gatorade. She drank her Gatorade, didn't want the soup. She was just like, I can't hold anything down. I just don't feel good, but I want to sleep it off. And I mentioned, like, can I take you to urgent care? Like, let's go to urgent care. just so you can get checked out. I even brought like an at-home COVID test just to check, and she didn't have COVID. And she was just like, no, not right now. Like, I just want to sleep. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to come back later. And if you're still not doing well later, I'm taking you to urgent care. So that was like around 3. I came back around 7, and she was very like, she was still sleeping, and she wasn't very like communicative. Like, when she would try to talk to me, she would kind of drift and wouldn't get her words out. My brother also came over because I mentioned to meet me there and just to check on her. And the first time when I went over, the lights were off, so she was in the dark. There was like a little bit of light coming in through the window, so I could see her a little bit, but I couldn't actually see her. So when I went over around 7, I checked her blood pressure because she's also diabetic and she has blood pressure problems. So I checked her blood pressure. It was fine. I couldn't check her sugars because she didn't have one of those like monitor things to check. So it seemed like everything was fine, but I kept telling her, let's go to urgent care because you haven't taken your meds in days, because she hasn't been eating. She doesn't want to eat anything, and there's no way for me to check her sugars, and she really needs to check her sugars. So she was being hard-headed and didn't want to go. And I told my brother, we should really take her. Then I was like, okay, I need to see her. So I turned on her bedside light, and I noticed her fingers, tips of her fingers and her toes were a little bit darker. So it seemed to me like as if she was losing oxygen or like something was wrong. Also, then when she would talk, it sounded like gurgling with her words. Usually if you hear it like when you're just breathing, it could be just like phlegm. But the fact that I heard it when she spoke also, it made me feel like she had fluids in her lungs. And I'm pretty familiar with that from my grandmother who also passed away 8.5 years ago. That was a very common thing for her. Her lungs would always fill with fluid. So my brother called 911. So because she didn't want to come, she didn't want to go to the doctor. So we were like, well, we're going to call the ambulance then to take you. And she was upset because we were taking her. She didn't want to go. And we were communicating with my dad through this whole time, so he was aware. And we took her to the ER. In the ER, they noticed her oxygen levels were low. Her blood sugars were like through the roof, quadruple the amount that it should be. Her blood pressure was still fine, but then they needed to do x-rays. And when they did the x-rays, her chest was completely cloudy. There was definitely fluid in her lungs, lots of CO2 in her body, in her chest, because since she was having trouble breathing, she wasn't letting out CO2. And oxygen couldn't get in. So they originally had her on a regular oxygen mask. Then once they realized that, they put her on a BPAP, which is a little bit stronger than a CPAP machine. She hated it. She was fighting it. She would rip it off. She just kept fighting it. So because she kept fighting it, they had to put her to sleep so she could stop ripping it off, because when she would leave it on, it was doing what it needed to do and getting the oxygen into her body the way it should have. By the way, I am skipping a lot of details because I could write a book with how many details there are. I'm just kind of summarizing. So she was then admitted into the hospital. They took us to her room. When they took us to her room, they started plugging in all her, like, all the wires and stuff. They started plugging them in to read them, to get the readings in the room. And I sat down. I was like ready to take a nap because it had been like a long night. So, and by this time it's like 3 in the morning. So once it was connected, they realized her blood pressure was kind of low. So they were like, oh, that's weird. I think the machine might be not reading it correctly. Let's unplug it and plug it back in. They did it again. It was lower. And I overheard one nurse saying, is she actually supposed to be in here, or should she be on the next wing? The next wing would be ICU, intensive care unit. Then I see the two, like, nurses, or I'm not sure what they were. I believe they were nurses, but they looked at each other and they just kept looking at each other. And it was fast, but it felt like a long time. And they did something where I don't know what triggered the amount of doctors and nurses that walked in with red bags that said sepsis. But I know that once you see that word, things are not good. And the moment a doctor kneels in front of you and tells you everything's going to be okay, know that everything's not going to be okay. Once that doctor did that to me, I had to step out for a little bit, and basically the infection from the pneumonia got into her blood, and next thing you know, she's being rolled over to the ICU to be intubated, and I don't see her for like hours because I can't be in the room. So this is like Tuesday, early in the morning, once we finally got to see her. But we pretty much made phone calls to family because we knew things weren't good. Family started coming. My mom was hooked up to lots and lots of IVs, lots of medication. She was intubated. And basically, by Wednesday, she needed to be transported to another hospital that had, because she needed more intensive treatment, basically getting catheters in her veins to be able to push the oxygen through the blood, or like pull out blood, and basically a machine that basically cleans the blood and pushes it back in, to replace the blood to get the infection out quicker. So the hospital here started the process of doing that, because if they would have taken her to the other hospital, she wouldn't make it on the trip. So they needed to start the process at this hospital to then transport her with that machine. During that time, we were told that, she was gone for 30 seconds and they brought her back. They gave us lots of hope that she was going to do great at this other hospital, and that she was going to pull through at this other hospital. We were giving so much confidence and hope. But little did we know that those 30 seconds that she was gone, it did so much damage. Once we were at the other hospital, like I said, we had the confidence, we had the hope. We were frustrated because we couldn't see her right away. It took hours, and they kept telling us, oh, it's a long process to switch her over to our machines, and so we can get up to speed to see what's going on. It took so many hours just for them to give us the worst news in the middle of the night, basically leading into Thursday, that when she left for those 30 seconds, she must have suffered a stroke and caused a brain bleed. The brain bleed was so large by the time they caught it that there's basically nothing that they could do. And basically, she had no more time left. And the only things keeping her alive were the machines. So, you basically can guess what happens next. So on Thursday, January 25th, I lost my mom. Because my brother and I were taking care of so much, taking care of her in the hospital and arrangements and everything, I feel like I haven't had the chance to actually grieve. And today I'm like by myself, alone with my thoughts, and it's so hard. I have lots of anger, lots of sadness, and I know it's gonna take time to not necessarily move on, because I don't think I will ever move on, but just to to cope. So I will be back here. I don't know how soon, I don't know when. I'm gonna try to be back as soon as I can, because my mom did love me creating content. So I'm gonna keep doing this for her. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.